Hey guys, and we are live. Welcome everyone. Welcome Ken. Welcome Marie. Just Janice, Jeremy. Welcome Aladdin. Welcome My Life for the Lord. God bless all of you. Keep me and this session in prayers. Just wait until a few more people drop in. And yeah, Aladdin, yeah, I will try to be nice, but I can't really promise. Okay? About being rude and stuff. Hey, welcome Infinity Apologetics. Welcome EMB. Valerian Sabotari. All right. So I'll just make a short prayer in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Ghost. Amen. Let's ask the Lord to use me well for this session so that I can edify all of you and educate all of you for the glory of His name and for defending His word, the Bible. And also, just in case any of you have your own intentions, just offer them up. Any prayer intentions you guys could be having that's related to your own personal life, health, or anything of that sort. I'll just offer that and surrender that to our triune God. I surrender this session to our triune God, and we pray that we don't run into any kind of technological issues, connection issues, so on and so forth. And may the Lord's will be done. All right, my life for the Lord. Intercede for your father. Please pray for my life for the Lord's Father, everyone. Hey, God bless you, Ahmad Khani. Good to see you. Okay, cool. We'll start with the session. Let's share my screen. Just checking, is my mic good, guys? Is my mic good? Hey, good to see you, XYZ. Okay, can you guys see my screen now? Is the screen visible? The slideshow and everything? Oops, sorry. My bad. Wrong button. Here we go. Slide this. Okay, coming back to our topic. This is part 2 of potentially a 4-part or maybe a 5-part video series. I have been waiting to do this since June, but never really got the time and the opportunity to work on this. So I don't even imagine that it's going to be 4 or 5 parts, because today's part itself would take quite a lot of time just to answer just two objections today from secular scholars concerning some historical mistakes in the book of Daniel. Last week we went through all this. Those of you who have missed my video last week could catch up. And going across today, well, last week I'd covered this thing about Darius the Mede and also the timeline of their prophecies, which is not syncing up, as brought about by secular objections. This week, we are going to cover some more historical issues in the book of Daniel. Okay, so I want everyone's attention. If Aladdin keeps trolling or distracting, you could just time him out. Don't block him. Okay. Hey, Aladdin, there's a session going on right now. Jeremy Wong and I will come together and reply to you directly, God willing, at some point when we are both free. We have our own personal lives and other videos to do. But don't worry, Aladdin. And just to let you know, some of the objections you have put, you have just crucified yourself and you have just call your prophet as a liar. Some of the objections you have put concerning the translations. So so that's just to bring to your notice. Okay, be very careful when you use these kind of objections. You don't know you're shooting your own prophet in the foot. Yep, Jeremy's busy with family. I'm busy with work and a lot of personal life. All right, and Aladdin, I'll just time you out for now so that you just don't chime in. Okay, sweet. So, historical issue number two. Now, there is an issue in certain biblical passages, and people want to use this as a tool to say Daniel was written late, not by Daniel himself. Now, the passages in question are Daniel chapter 1, verses 1 to 2, and Jeremiah chapter 25, verse 1. Yes, EMB Maxim, he can't disturb us. This is class, and I want class discipline. All right. Bad students will be punished, and they'll have to go sit in the corner for five minutes. Okay. So now, if you're going to Bible Gateway, Ahmad Khani, like if possible, you could just post these verses, Daniel 1, 1 to 2, and Jeremiah 25, 1. So this objection is quite very straightforward. It's saying King Nebuchadnezzar, the king of the Babylonians, invaded Jerusalem in the third year of the reign of King Jehoiakim of Judah. But whereas in the book of the prophet Jeremiah, it says that this invasion happened in the fourth year of the reign of Jeremiah. So they are saying that there is a problem here. Can you guys see that? Hey, good to see you, Michael V. Realize. Good to see you, Siddharth. So third year versus the fourth year. Therefore, there is a contradiction in the way Daniel is dating things and in the way Jeremiah is dating things. So Daniel has to be false because that author had no idea what he was talking about since it was written late. Okay. So how do we fix this contradiction? It's quite easy. It's evident in the text. There is no contradiction here. It's just two different dating systems, and which are used to count the reign of kings. Now, Jeremiah uses a non-ascension here system. Now, what does that mean? What does that mean? Uh, when it says that this guy, Jehoiakim, had ascended the king of Judah, it takes into account his partial months. So, suppose, say, if I'll just use Notepad again, just for your convenience. I'll just increase the text a bit for your convenience again. This is the size, I'll get it to 18. Guys, is size 18 good enough for you guys to see? Just need to check, especially ones who are using the phone. Is the size good enough for you guys? The text size, especially the people who are using the phone, let me know if it needs to be made any bigger. I know that there is a delay in StreamYard by about 10 to 15 seconds roughly. Do you need the text to be bigger? Okay, gotcha. Is it good now? Little zoom. For PC, it's good. I'm on the phone, it's good. Okay, cool. I got it to 20. Okay. Now, sorry, those are just other notes are done. Now, just to let you know, this is how Jeremiah's system works. Now, Jeremiah dates partial years as a year because he used an Egyptian and say uh, Israeli dating system to count the reign of kings. So, for example, let's say if Ahmad Khani is king from January 2021 and until November, say 2021, how much is that, people? 11 months? 1 year. 11 months, right? So Ahmad Ghani is king for about 11 months. I'll just make it a little bit bigger for phone, just in case. Here we go. So that's about 11 months. But what Jeremiah does is, Jeremiah records this as, so now for example, now in December, this guy becomes king. Okay? And he rules until December 2022, which is say 13 months, which comes to say 1 year and 1 month. Okay, but now what Jeremiah does is he counts this partial month here, 1 month as 1 year. So Jeremiah dates it this way. You get that? So this is what's happening. So Jeremiah dates it as 2 years, the reign of Ken Nareda, instead of saying it happened for 1 year and 1 month. So that's the objection. This thing can be very easily be answered, whereas Daniel does not consider partial years. So there's apparent discrepancy which scholars want to gain in this slide, where Daniel was dating this as year 3, and Jeremiah was dating this as year 4. This can be resolved. All right. So this is historical issue 2A. But if you would look at the title, they say that the 605 AD never really happened. Yes, Ahmad Ghani. Yeah, I was counting from the start of December 2021 to end of December 2022. But what Jeremiah does in his dating is he takes that December calendar year as an entire year. That's how he reckons dates. He doesn't consider the partial year. I mean, he considers the partial year as an entire year. That's the thing. All right. Hey, good to see you, Ben Yosef. Good morning. But now, this next objection here is the most trickiest objection. It's the most challenging objection which our scholars have raised against the book of Daniel. This one, this objection. Okay. And to answer this objection, you guys have to bear with me and just pay attention, pay very careful attention to what's going on. Now, what historians claim is that Nebuchadnezzar didn't actually invade Jerusalem or besiege it in 605 BC, but rather he did it in 597 BC. And where is the proof? They say that other books in the Bible say it happened around 597 BC, that Nebuchadnezzar invaded Jerusalem in the 11th year of King Joachim, that is 597 BC, and not the 4th year. Okay, so they cite Second Chronicles verses 36, 5 to 6. So I'll just go back to Second Chronicles verses 36. Oops, sorry about the Discord. Yeah. Second Chronicles 36, verses 5 to 6. Now they are saying the same king, Jehoiakim, was king of Judah, was 25 when he became king, and he reigned 11 years in Jerusalem, and he did evil in the sight of the Lord his God. This guy was a wicked king. Now Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came up against him and bound him in bronze fetters to carry him off to Babylon. Now it's saying he ruled in 11 years, and apparently Nebuchadnezzar invaded Judah at the 11th year of his reign and took him off to Babylon. That's what the text here says. Now, this is in contradiction with Daniel, which says that this thing actually happened in the third year of Jehoiakim's reign. Okay, in the third year. In the third year of the reign of King Jehoiakim of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem and besieged it. And the Lord gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand with some of the articles of the house of God, which he carried into the land of Shinar, to the house of his God, that is, his Babylonian God. And he brought the articles into the treasure house of his God. Now, see, this thing is saying third year. Jeremiah will read uh, fourth year, but I said the fourth and the third year can be resolved. But now the problems is Chronicles. This year is 597 BC. So just to explain this objection, what happens? Daniel or Jeremiah say Nebuchadnezzar first invaded during the third year of Jehoiakim's reign and took him prisoner. Okay, this took place in 605 AD. But Second Chronicles 36 says it happened in the 11th year of the same king's reign, Joachim's reign, which is 597 AD. Okay, you get that objection, guys? I just want to check. Yes, Benny, it's good to see you. Sorry I couldn't do it last week. There were other things going on. So you can see the big difference. You can here see this objection. And now what they say is in the Babylonian Chronicles, that is another historical source, it talks about the 597 AD siege of Jerusalem. Okay, no mention, there's no mention of 605 AD. Therefore, Daniel is fiction. Daniel made a mistake. Daniel was written late since he made this blunder. Okay, so they want to make this case against it. All right. Now, how do we solve it? The Bible has all the answers. Okay, the Bible has all the answers. Yes, Ahmad Ghani, you're on the right track. There were multiple sieges. I'll come to that. Okay, you're on the right track. There were multiple sieges. Yes, Aliko, that is me typing on my notepad. Just to say, break down the objection for everyone's understanding. Coming back to the slideshow. So, which is the text? Oh yeah, I do type fast since I'm an IT guy. So 2 Kings 24:1. but not that fast. I'm just about 60 words a minute, I think. 60 words a minute to max 70 words a minute. I know people who can type 100 to 120 words a minute, and that's fast. So, Second Kings 24:1, however, does talk about Nebuchadnezzar coming to Babylon and making Jehoiakim his vassal for 3 years. That is one of his generals. Okay. Yes, Deus Imperator. You gave the answer. So if I'm going to say Second Kings 24, verse 1, in his days, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came up, and Jehoiakim became his vassal for 3 years. Then he turned and rebelled against him. Now take a note of this thing. So it's saying that Nebuchadnezzar did show up in 605 AD, and he made Jehoiakim his vassal. Now, vassal means a king who will be under him, paying tribute, paying tax to him, like a puppet king under him. Okay. So, and so does Second Chronicles 36, verse 6 hints at this. So, just to give you a recap, Second Chronicles 36, verse 6. Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came up against him and bound him in bronze fetters to carry him off to Babylon. There is a small hint that verse 6 is actually talking about the siege in 605, whereas verse 5 is talking about the siege in 597 and not 605. Okay. And now we have one historian, a scholar, Joyce Baldwin, who says all that Daniel 1 verse 2 needs to say is that Nebuchadnezzar threatened Jerusalem, which being a vassal of Egypt, came under the jurisdiction of Babylon when the Egyptian hold over Syro-Palestine was broken after the Battle of Carchemish. So what happened was during those days, Judah used to rely on Egypt for strength. Egypt was their ally, but what happened was these guys took over Egypt, and since Judah was an ally of Egypt, they too became a vassal of Nebuchadnezzar in 605 AD, roughly around that point of time. So you can conclude that there were three sieges, one in 605, one in 597, and one in 586 BC. And another scholar, Andrew Statements, also Steinman, also notes this, that Daniel simply states that Nebuchadnezzar besieged Jerusalem. Okay, that is in Daniel 1, verse 1 to 2. He does not say that Jerusalem was conquered. It never says that. Because if you're reading uh, Daniel 1, verses 1 to 2, back here, it's not saying that Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem and besieged it. It never said that he conquered it. Okay, so this is what this guy is saying. The Lord gave his hand to Joachim of Judah. Daniel may be indicating that Joachim, as an ally of the defeated Pharaoh Necho of Egypt, surrendered almost immediately. Because what happened at the Battle of Carchemish in this previous slide was that Egypt lost to Nebuchadnezzar, and since Judah was an underling to Egypt, they could have surrendered. Okay. Thus, if Nebuchadnezzar was merely mopping up after his victory, Jerusalem may have been an easy plum to pick that year. So, the Babylonian Chronicle would not talk about it since it was not really a conquest. It was not really a conquest of Jerusalem. It was just a siege, and they never really completed the siege. That guy could have just surrendered, and the king would have just been ferried away to Babylon. All right. Oh, the Jezebel Danraj. You should just watch my series on her. I'll go after Hinduism once I'm done with this series. Probably 2 more episodes on this, maximum 3. Okay. But again, people say that there is still a problem in the text of Daniel. What's the problem in the text of Daniel 1:2? Now, the problem in the text of Daniel 1:2 is The Lord gave Jehoiakim king of Judah into Nebuchadnezzar's hands with some of the articles of the temple, which he carried into the land of Shinar to the house of his God, and he brought the articles into the treasure of the house of his God. Now, people would say that at the third year, this is a problem because this guy was taken prisoner and carried away to Babylon. But over here it says in Second Chronicles, this thing happened in the 11th year, not in the third year. But what people can interpret this text as, he would have just been taken away to the land of Babylon and could have sworn allegiance to Nebuchadnezzar, and then he would have been brought back to Judah as his vassal, because that kind of goes hand in hand with 2 Kings 24:1. In his days, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came up, and Jehoiakim became his vassal for 3 years. So that's what exactly happened. So this text is not really a problem. So as I was saying, Second Chronicles 36 verse 6 can be interpreted as Jehoiakim was bound and taken to Babylon and forced to swear an oath of allegiance to Babylon before being sent back to Jerusalem. So he just became Nebuchadnezzar's puppet king. And at this point, both Egypt and Judah were Babylon. I have a typo here. It's actually Babylon. Just a minute, guys. I'll just fix this typo. Okay, here we go. That makes sense. And then in 2 Kings 24:1, he was a vassal for 3 years and he rebelled. That is in 601 BC, roughly, against Nebuchadnezzar. But why did Jehoiakim rebel? You know why? Because we have information in the Babylonian Chronicles that Egypt fought the Babylonians in 601 AD and they beat the Babylonians for a while. Although Egypt was forced to be a vassal in 605 or say 604 BC, they, sorry, another typo, guys, another typo. Forgive me for that. And they beat them. And since Egypt beat Babylon, this would have prompted Jehoiakim, who was allies with Egypt, to rebel against Babylon. So Nebuchadnezzar besieging Jerusalem actually did happen in 605 BC. Okay, and yeah, Daniel was a member of the royal family, as Deus Imperator says. He was taken hostage around 605 BC, maybe as a child or a teenager at best. So now they want to bring another small objection that Jehoiakim was technically killed before the sacking of Jerusalem, and his son Jehoiachin, also known as Jeconiah, reigned for a few months prior to the fall of Jerusalem at the end of 598 BC. So they are saying that during his 11th reign, uh, since Nebuchadnezzar came in to crush his rebellion, which he did right here, that he rebelled against Nebuchadnezzar, he does come down 3 years later. He crushes his rebellion and technically could have killed Joachim. And then Nebuchadnezzar makes Joachim's son, Joachim or Joachim. I know the names are a bit confusing, as king of Judah. And he just rules for a few months actually. And then Nebuchadnezzar takes Judah in 597 BC and he exiles even his son to Babylon. So the Bible does fix this, saying, due to Daniel saying the invasion of Nebuchadnezzar happened in 605 AD, that is the fourth year or the third year of Joachim's reign. Joachim died in the 11th year of his reign, that is the end of 598 BC. His son Jeconiah or Joachim ruled for a few months before being exiled by Nebuchadnezzar's invasion in 597 BC. Okay, so it just to break this down for you guys. Just again typing. Since just on the top. So this is just the line of kings. That was King Josiah, his son Jehoahaz ruled after him. Then Jehoahaz, his brother Jehoiakim, ruled after him. This was the king who was under Necho. And then his son Jehoiachin was put in place and then put in this. So I'll just put some dates here. So this guy, 608 AD to 598 AD. Nebuchadnezzar. Invasion in 605 AD. Okay, his third or fourth year. Just to sum this up. Then you have his son Jehoiakim, who just lasted a few months, 597 AD. Sorry, BC, not AD. My bad. Sorry about the slip. BC. He got exiled to Babylon. That was the second king. Then his uncle became king until 586 AD. And 586 AD, captured by Nebuchadnezzar. And also, finally, Jerusalem was besieged. And what else happened the same year? The Temple of Solomon was destroyed. Judah exiled to Babylon for 70 odd years. Okay. Thanks for letting me know. And at this stage, yes, as Deus Imperator was saying, over here, more members of the royal family were taken. That is Jehoiakim, around 597 BC. He was exiled to Babylon along with family members. So this is just a brief timeline of what happened, just to get that out of the head. So there were three invasions: 605, 597, and 586. So that just reconciles the Bible. Oh yeah, I just missed Zedekiah. Thanks again, Ahmad Khani. Okay, here you go. Okay, now we come to the next objection. It has to do with Daniel chapter 5. Yes, Deus Imperator's sons were murdered before his eyes, and then Zedekiah's eyes were taken out, and then he was imprisoned. Belshazzar was not the last king of Babylon. Now, if you guys are reading Daniel chapter 5, I'll just go back to Daniel chapter number 5, which is the fall of Babylon. So Belshazzar, technically people read it as one of the successors of Nebuchadnezzar. So after Nebuchadnezzar's death, it seems Belshazzar was the king of Babylon. So here, Belshazzar the king made a great feast for 1,000 of his lords and drank wine in the presence of the 1,000. While he tasted the wine, Belshazzar gave the command to bring the gold and silver vessels which his father Nebuchadnezzar had taken from the temple which had been in Jerusalem, that the king and lords, his wives, and his concubines might drink from them. So, in other words, Belshazzar was just creating a kind of a blasphemy, which was blasphemy. The implements, vessels, and tools which were used in the Temple of Solomon as instruments of worship, he ordered them to be brought to his court so that him, his wives, his concubines, and his officials could eat and drink and do all kinds of stuff, maybe fornication, harlotry, and God knows what. So he was committing a big sacrilege. Then they brought the gold vessels that had been taken from the temple of the house of God, which had been in Jerusalem, and the king and his lords, his wives, and concubines drank from them. They drank wine and praised the gods of gold and silver, bronze and iron, wood and stone. So they desecrated these things, committed sacrilege, yes, Ahmad Ghani, of the things of the temple of God, which were taken from the first temple, and they used it to offer it up to their own gods, their own false gods. Next, in the same hour, now this is where it gets interesting. I will talk about this sometime in part 4, this part. In the same hour, the fingers of a man's hand appeared and wrote opposite the lampstand on the plaster of the wall of the king's palace, and the king saw the part of the hand that wrote. Then the king's countenance changed, and his thoughts troubled him, so that at the joints of his hips were loosened and his knees knocked against each other. So what happened was some some hand just appeared out of nowhere and started writing something on the wall. And when the king and all these guys are just having a good time in their party and blaspheming the Lord, he just sees this thing happening and now he's suddenly shocked. Okay, his mood for parting is gone. The king cried aloud to bring in the astrologers, the Chaldeans, and the soothsayers, whatever, his astronomers, his magicians, all the so called wise men of the kingdom. The king spoke, saying to the wise men of Babylon, whoever reads this writing and tells me its interpretation shall be clothed with purple and have a chain of gold around his neck, and he shall be the third ruler in the kingdom. Okay, take a note of this thing. He shall be the third ruler in the kingdom. Okay, now all the king's wise men came, but they could not read the writing or make known to the king its interpretation. Okay, none of these frauds could do that. Then King Belshazzar was greatly troubled, his countenance was changed, and his lords were astonished. The queen, because of the words of the king and his lords, came to the banquet hall. The queen spoke, saying, O king, live forever. Do not let your thoughts trouble you, nor let your countenance change. Okay, so do not be afraid. That's what she's telling him. Some commentators say that this could be the queen mother, not necessarily be the queen. Okay, there is a man in your kingdom in whom is the spirit of the holy God. So she's talking about Daniel. And in the days of your father, light and understanding and wisdom, like the wisdom of the gods, were found in him. And King Nebuchadnezzar, your father, your father the king, made him chief of the magicians, astrologers, Chaldeans, and soothsayers. So she talks about Daniel, and she gets Daniel to explain the writing on the wall. Then Daniel was brought in before the king. The king spoke and said to Daniel, Are you that Daniel who is one of the captives from Judah, whom my father the king brought from Judah? Whom my father the king brought from Judah. That again goes back to Daniel chapter 1. This is 605 AD invasion. Sorry, 605 BC invasion. I have heard of you that the Spirit of God is in you, and that light and understanding and excellent wisdom are found in you. Now the wise men, the astrologers, have been brought in before me, that they should read this writing and make them known to me its interpretation. But they could not give the interpretation of the thing. Okay. And then Daniel, I'll just skip over to this part. O king, the Most High God gave Nebuchadnezzar, your father, a kingdom and majesty. So now this is Daniel speaking. So he's going to talk about this writing. He gave him, your father, a kingdom, majesty, glory, and honor. And because of the majesty that he gave him, all peoples, nations, and languages trembled and feared before him. Whomever he wished, he executed. Whomever he wished, he kept alive. Whomever he wished, he set up. And whomever he wished, he put down. But when his heart was lifted up and his spirit was hardened in pride, he was deposed from his kingly throne and they took his glory from him. So, this is Daniel 4, where Nebuchadnezzar actually becomes mad. Then he was driven from the sons of men. His heart was made like the beasts, and his dwelling was with the wild donkeys. So Nebuchadnezzar had become mentally ill for some time. This is again in Daniel 4 if you read it. So he's just narrating Nebuchadnezzar's story, what happened when Nebuchadnezzar had thought no end of himself and had glowed with pride and all these things. So he started living like an animal, and his body was wet with the dew of heaven till he knew that the God Most High rules in the kingdom of men and appoints over it whomever he chooses. So, what happens at the end of Daniel 4 is Nebuchadnezzar acknowledges that the God of Israel is the true God. Daniel's God is the true God, and he worships him. And at that point of time, Nebuchadnezzar is cured of this mental illness which he had. So, what Daniel is basically saying is that Nebuchadnezzar repented of his pride and his ways, and he came to know and worship the one true God. He would have probably died as a believer. Okay. But now he's turning to Belshazzar. But you, his son Belshazzar, have not humbled your heart, although you knew all this. Okay. So you knew about your father Nebuchadnezzar's repentance. You didn't do this. And you have lifted yourself up against the Lord of heaven. They have brought the vessels of his house before you, and you and your lords, your wives, and your concubines have drunk from them, committed sacrilege and blasphemy against the God of Israel. And you have praised the gods of silver and gold and iron and wood and stone, which do not see or hear or know, and the God who holds your breath in his hand and owns all your ways, you have not glorified them. Then the fingers of the hand sent from him, and this writing was written. Okay. Many tekel upharsin. This is the interpretation of each word. Many, God has numbered your kingdom and finished it. Tekel, you have been weighed in the balances and found wanting. Perez, your kingdom has been divided and given to the Medes and the Persians. So Cyrus is going to conquer the Babylonians. Then Belshazzar gave the command, and they clothed Daniel with purple and put a chain of gold around his neck and made a proclamation concerning him that he should be the third ruler in the kingdom. Now take a note of this language, third ruler in the kingdom. And that very same night, Belshazzar, king of the Chaldeans, was killed, and Darius the Mede received the kingdom being 62 years old. And I explained in the last video, Darius the Mede is none other than King Cyrus himself to resolve the first historical objection. All right, so now coming back to the objections of our so-called magicians and scholars of today. Okay, so now this is what our magicians and scholars and astrologers and Chaldeans of today want to say. Uh, about 100 years ago, people believed that Belshazzar was fiction because there was no evidence concerning Belshazzar. All right. They thought that they messed it up because the last king of Babylon was actually Nabonidus, according to historical records. And the earliest known historical records when Babylon had fallen, the king at that time, his name was Nabonidus, not Belshazzar. Okay, so people thought that Belshazzar was a myth because of this historian called as Herodotus, who lived in the 5th century BC. That is not too far away, about 50 years after the time of Daniel. Since he was close, they accept Herodotus' story concerning Nabonidus being the last king of Babylon, not Belshazzar. However, archaeology proved this guy wrong. Discovery of the Nabonidus Chronicle disproved that. Okay, so we have a set of Babylonian chronicles, some cylinders in which there is ancient Aramaic text and cuneiform text, you could say, wherein uh, the identity of Belshazzar is given to be as Nabonidus' son. Okay, so Belshazzar, this man, Belshazzar, was actually Nabonidus' son. But they are saying that okay, Belshazzar existed, but there is no proof to say that what happened to Nabonidus, because all historians are saying Nabonidus was the last king. But you're saying Belshazzar was king when this guy said, so maybe Herodotus could have made a mistake. Who knows? Now there is one more problem. Belshazzar can't be the son of Nebuchadnezzar. Okay? Belshazzar can't be the son of Nebuchadnezzar because we had Nabonidus before him. What would that make him? The grandson? Okay, but even if as a Christian or people who know their Bible can say that if the Jews used to call themselves as the descendants of Abraham, they used to call Abraham their father, although it was not a direct father-son relationship, but Abraham was their forefather. They used to call Jesus as the son of David, although Jesus was not literally David's son, as in father to son in one generation, but he was descended from the line of David, so you could still disprove that. But historians come up with another objection concerning Belshazzar, saying that he might not even have been related to Nebuchadnezzar. Okay. Now, concerning this objection about Nabonidus being the last king and Belshazzar not again being king, again, there are other archaeological artifacts which mention that Belshazzar was actually an acting king or a regent. Why was that the case? Because Nabonidus, although he ruled Babylon for about 17 or 18 years, about 17 years, you could say, half the time he was not in Babylon, he had gone south to Arabia. And he ruled in Arabia for at least a decade, and he kept Belshazzar in charge of the throne. So that makes sense why Belshazzar wanted to make Daniel the third in the kingdom and not the second in the kingdom. Because Belshazzar was the second in the kingdom, his father Nabonidus was still alive and the first in the kingdom. Okay? Oh, yeah, Murray, these are all the modern scholars putting up these objections one after the other. Every time some archaeological evidence gets discovered in our favor, they start tap dancing and they start bringing up another objection. Okay? And Daniel, I think, is the most critiqued book in the Old Testament. It's the most critiqued book in the Old Testament, apart from, say, Isaiah and Genesis, especially Genesis and the Torah, more or less the Torah, the first 5 books. So that explains why Daniel was made the third ruler in the kingdom, and that vindicates the Bible in this sense because no historian, not even Herodotus, who was closest to that time, ever records this. So it's impossible for Daniel, if they are saying Daniel had written Daniel in the 2nd century BC, that is around the time of the Maccabean revolt, which is almost 400 years later, how would Daniel know this piece of inside information? Because this is inside information, by the way, that this guy was the second in the kingdom and he was being third. Now, this detail, you won't get it in among any historian. Even Herodotus, although he was closest to that time, he's made mistakes. So this proves that, in a way, Daniel was right there. He knew whatever was going on in the Babylonian courts, and so on and so forth. Okay. But, and also just a side note, what was Nabonidus? Nabonidus was a Muslim. Oh yeah, so Muslims did exist at that point of time because he was worshipping a certain moon god. He had gone to Arabia to worship a certain moon god. He was a big devotee of that moon god. And apparently, this was Islam about 1100 years before the time of Muhammad. So he was worshipping a moon god. But somehow Jews and Daniel were not worshipping this moon god. So at least I can just give some credit to Muhammad that, okay, Allah existed before his time, but he was a pagan god whom they want to conflate with the God of the Bible. Because I didn't see Daniel worshipping the moon god. I didn't see any of the Jews exiled over there worshipping such a moon god, but their ruler was worshipping some moon god. Okay, just this note. So when Babylon had fallen, he was still in Arabia, being a devotee of that moon god, and I think Nabonidus was killed months later after this fall. But now that still doesn't answer one objection. Since we have proved that Belshazzar was the last king of Babylon, and he was not, and he was there when Babylon fell. This guy's the third in the kingdom. Now, our modern scholars want to come up with another objection. Now, what's this objection? They are saying that, say, Nebuchadnezzar died in 562 BC. That's correct. Now, Nabonidus became king, that is Belshazzar's father. Nabonidus, the Muslim, became king 6 years later, that is in 556 BC, and took over by a coup. So it was actually Nabonidus was not related to Nebuchadnezzar. He made a revolt and he took over. Since Nabonidus is not related to Nebuchadnezzar, Belshazzar cannot be a son of Nebuchadnezzar. So even if we use the biblical way of calling a son as a descendant of someone, even that won't work because you can't really say that Belshazzar was by blood related to Nabucodonosor because Nabonidus came in 6 years after and he overthrew the royal family and he ascended to the throne. And Belshazzar was his son, therefore he can't be related to Nebuchadnezzar. Got that objection? So, how do we come to that? Just a bit of detail. Nebuchadnezzar died in 562 BC, and there were three kings from Nebuchadnezzar's family after him. And then this guy came in 6 years later. He took Babylon, and he killed Nebuchadnezzar's family and the king who was ruling at that time, and took over by a coup. Nabonidus. Okay. Now, how do we refute this? Now now some conservative scholars on our side want to say that Belshazzar was a descendant to Nebuchadnezzar via his maternal line. Now, according to some scholars, they do cite Herodotus. Now, just listen to this. Our scholars will state Herodotus again to say that Nabonidus, Belshazzar's father, married Nitocris, who would have been one of Nebuchadnezzar's former wives, or maybe a daughter of Nebuchadnezzar. And because of that, Belshazzar can claim that he is a son of Nebuchadnezzar because the blood of Nebuchadnezzar somehow will flow in his veins. And they want to cite Herodotus for that. But now, this is the double game historians want to play, are secular historians and secular scholars. Now, Herodotus is not their man to claim this, but now they're saying, well, you can't say that Herodotus is reliable because he said that Nabonidus was the last king, but it turns out that Belshazzar happened to be the last king. So you can't say now that Herodotus is reliable. He makes mistakes about the kings of Babylon. So I can say that he can't say that Belshazzar could be related to Nebuchadnezzar. So, in other words, this is their hypocrisy. When you want the objection to work for them, That time they'll cite Herodotus, okay? When you want the objection to work for them. When you have proven it and you don't want the objection to work for them, then suddenly Herodotus has become unreliable. Look at the hypocrisy. They want to play the game both ways. You see that? This is how these bastards just want to tap dance. Seriously. Stay away from liberal scholarship. And unfortunately, this narrative is being taught at seminaries, it's being taught at theological colleges. Whether you're Catholic, Orthodox, or Protestant, this is the standard narrative they learn with respect to biblical scholarship. And even some of our Bibles these days even state that Daniel is fictional and pseudographical and things like that. So they are saying this counts as weak evidence. Okay, this is weak evidence. So therefore, you can't actually assert that Belshazzar was a son of Nebuchadnezzar in that sense, whether genetically as his grandson or great grandson or whatever, because this time Herodotus isn't reliable. Okay, but when we wanted to prove Belshazzar's existence, we wanted to disprove Belshazzar's existence. That time Herodotus was reliable. The moment we prove all the facts about Daniel concerning Belshazzar, now Herodotus suddenly isn't reliable. Wow, look at the consistency, folks. Liars. Okay, so how do we get past this argument? That's another way to get past this argument. So now in ancient Semitic languages like Aramaic or Hebrew, given the cultural context, the words son and father have multiple connotations, can mean multiple things. Because son and father can encompass multiple generations. That's what I said about Jesus being called the son of David. He's a descendant of David, but not his direct son. The children of Israel being calling Abraham their father. They are descendants of Abraham, but not his direct children. But now that objection won't work because they say Herodotus is not reliable. But successor and predecessor, even in non-hereditary relationships, it even means that according to uh, the context. And where have we seen this context being used? Like a prophet's disciples used to be called sons, and they used to call their prophet as their father. The same thing can be said about Saint Paul. Saint Paul used to call the Corinthians as his children, and he was like their father. Saint Paul used to call Timothy his son, and he was like his father. Okay. Now, King Amaziah, or was it King Ahaziah, he called the prophet Elisha his father in that kind of a sense. Another relationship is successor and predecessor relationship. So now this guy notes, Andrew Steinman again notes that on the Black Obelisk, that is another piece of archaeological evidence erected by the Assyrian king Shalmaneser the third about 830 BC, who was a contemporary king of northern Israel. Jehu is called as the son of Omri. Now, if you guys read the first book of Kings, you will see that Jehu is anointed by the prophet Elijah to destroy King Ahab's family. You know, King Ahab or King Ahab and his wife Jezebel. Okay, so Omri, he's the father of Ahab. All right, Omri is the father of Ahab. But now Jehu, he is not related to Ahab or Omri because Jehu was anointed by Elijah, and what Jehu did was he killed Jezebel and he killed the rest of Ahab's family. But now on this Assyrian obelisk, Jehu is called the son of Omri, even though Jehu had exterminated the descendants of Omri, an earlier northern king of Israel. Shalmaneser, who conducted several campaigns in Syria and Israel between 859 and 841, could hardly have been unaware that Jehu was not a descendant of Omri. So he's also saying that Shalmaneser was not ignorant of this fact because he was a contemporary of Jehu and he knew these guys. He knew Ahab. He would have also known Omri. Instead, it appeared as if he used son to mean successor. Okay, so in Daniel 5, whenever Nebuchadnezzar is mentioned as the father of Belshazzar, or Belshazzar is mentioned as the son of Nebuchadnezzar, it just means a predecessor and or successor relationship and not a blood relationship. You could also put it that way if they want to throw Herodotus under the bus. No, since he's not making that case. Okay, and there are more objections to cover, folks, but there are some linguistic objections, and then I need to go through this part again about Ben Sira. Then there are some objections related to the Jewish canon. This might actually even disappoint some Protestants, but I'm just going to say things as it is. Then there's some positive evidence in the form of the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Septuagint, and there are some more positive evidence related to messianic prophecies, which I'm yet to cover, and some more positive evidence related to Belshazzar. All right, so just stop sharing my screen. Thank you so much for tuning in, people, and God willing, I'll be covering the linguistic objections sometime mid next week, and a couple of other sets of objections, and I intend to finish this series, God willing, by mid of this month, probably by next weekend, God willing, if the Lord wills. Then I could just focus my attention back to Unitarianism, especially Hinduism, and yeah, probably make a video with Jeremy to refute Aladdin, God willing. Okay, thank you so much, and please pray for me, people. Pray for each other. May God keep us safe, help us to be actually doers of His word and just abide in His word, not just give lip service or just try to increase our knowledge by just learning apologetics and scriptures, but actually living it out in our daily life and to walk with integrity and not shame His name. So, God bless all of you, and see you next week, God willing. Thank you for watching.